Why did no one in Timber Creek ever ask too many questions about the quiet waitress at the Blue Moon Diner? It wasn't because they didn't notice her. People noticed Sierra Blake. They noticed the way her auburn hair was always pulled into a simple ponytail, never loose, never careless. They noticed the steel-gray eyes that seemed to take in everything at once, not with idle curiosity, but with the sharpness of someone cataloging exits, watching hands, judging intentions. They noticed how she could carry 3 coffee pots at once without spilling a drop, how she remembered orders down to the smallest detail, and how she never, ever, sat with her back to a door. But for 8 years, nobody in Timber Creek pushed harder than polite conversation allowed. They had their theories, of course. Who owned the diner told herself Sierra was probably running from an abusive relationship. Frank, the sheriff who'd spent 23 years reading people like unfinished case files, suspected something closer to witness protection. The younger crowd whispered that she'd been military, pointing to her posture, her precise movements, the way she seemed more alert at rest than most people were at their busiest. The town had grown used to her the way you grow used to a mountain in the distance, impressive, solid, quietly present, yet untouchable. She was their waitress. Polite, efficient, invisible. And that's exactly how Sierra needed it to be. Every morning, Timber Creek woke to the smell of pine sap on mountain air, to the thunder of the Cascade River cutting its path through stone, to the echo of logging trucks on gravel roads. But just before dawn, before the first customer pushed through the diner's creaky door, the woods behind Sierra's modest cabin whispered a different kind of rhythm. Boots on wet ground, controlled breathing, metal sliding into place with a clean, oiled click, routines that had nothing to do with frying bacon or pouring coffee. What nobody knew was that beneath Sierra's cabin lay a reinforced basement shielded from satellites and curious eyes. Hidden behind false walls and electromagnetic dampening was an arsenal that would make a Navy SEAL team envious. Rifles aligned like choir singers, communications gear humming quietly in standby, survival kits packed with cold precision, and on the wall, a tactical vest with one word stitched inside the collar: Mirage. She hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. A call sign that had once carried weight in places most Americans couldn't find on a map. A name that belonged to a ghost. Sometimes, late at night when the diner lights were off and the town slept, Sierra would slip into that basement. Her hands would move across weapons like they were old friends. She would train in silence, shadows breaking against her as she moved. And in those moments, the mask she wore by day, the waitress with the practiced smile, would fall away. She was no longer Sierra Blake. She was Chief Petty Officer Sierra Martinez, Navy SEAL, Black Tide survivor, Mirage. But no one in Timber Creek knew that, and Sierra prayed they never would. At 5:30 a.m., she unlocked the Blue Moon Diner. At 6:00 sharp, Sheriff lumbered in for black coffee, wheat toast, and 2 eggs over easy. By 6:15, the logging crews arrived, boots muddy, laughter loud, the smell of pine sap and sawdust clinging to them. Sierra moved among them like water, present, efficient, untouchable. Her smile reached just far enough to be polite, never close enough to invite. The town accepted her that way, maybe even admired it, but admiration was dangerous. Admiration turned to curiosity, and curiosity dug holes in carefully constructed walls. Sierra had spent 8 years maintaining those walls, 8 years praying they would never be tested. But on one Tuesday morning, she felt it before she saw it. Storm clouds gathering over the Cascades, not the kind that brought rain, but the kind that made the air feel heavier. Soldiers knew that feeling. The air pressure that precedes the moment when something breaks. Her instincts, honed in operations where a single wrong breath meant death, whispered, "Something is coming." She was refilling Frank's coffee cup when she heard them. Vehicles on the mountain road, not local pickups, not loggers' rigs, these were heavier. Their engines purred with military precision, convoy spacing, coordinated timing. Her gaze shifted to the window. Black SUVs moving in formation. No plates, no wasted movement. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot. For 8 years, she had been invisible. But invisibility only worked until the wrong people started looking. Behind the diner's counter, beneath the register, was a hidden switch. a panic trigger. If she pressed it, the systems beneath her cabin would wipe themselves clean in under 90 seconds. Every file burned, every hard drive fried, every weapon either detonated or hidden beyond recovery. Her extraction protocols would activate, a trail of false data scattering her identity across continents. Her fingers itched toward the button, but she didn't press it. Because training told her one thing: never move until you understand the battlefield. The SUVs slowed near the town center, engines rumbling like distant artillery. Then they rolled past, disappearing around a bend. Sierra kept her expression neutral as she set the coffee pot down. But inside, she knew the storm she'd been outrunning for 8 years had finally found her. The question wasn't whether Sierra Blake would survive what was coming. The question was whether Mirage was about to wake up again. The diner carried on with its usual rhythm, almost mocking her with its normality. The loggers joked about quotas, bustled in with flour on her apron. Frank teased her about being jumpy, and Sierra deflected with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. But every sense was burning, every sound catalogued, every movement assessed. At 10:15, the first test walked through the diner door. 2 men, jeans, button-up shirts, travelers' jackets. The kind of look designed to be forgettable, but they weren't forgettable, not to Sierra. Their weapons were hidden well, but not perfectly. Their eyes swept the diner just a second too long, and when they sat, they did so with a clear line of sight to every exit. Law enforcement, or worse. "Morning," Sierra said, voice even, coffee pot in hand. "What can I get you?" "Coffee," the taller one answered. His accent carried the faintest trace of Virginia. "We were hoping you might recommend some local sites." A simple question, too simple. Sierra poured their coffee. "Depends what you're interested in. Mountains are beautiful, but with this storm coming in, you might want to stay closer to town." The shorter one leaned forward. "Actually, we've heard this place has some interesting history. People who came here after traveling extensively." "Fishing." Intelligence probing disguised as conversation. "Well," Sierra replied smoothly, "Timber Creek attracts all kinds. Mountains have a way of pulling in people who like their privacy. More coffee." Neither man touched their cups. The taller one smiled thinly. "We're particularly interested in people with specialized backgrounds, military perhaps." Her blood went cold, though her hand never trembled. "You might want to ask Sheriff," she said. "Army vet, he loves telling war stories." The shorter one repeated the sheriff's name, filing it away. Then they stood, leaving far too much money on the table, a payment meant to ensure she remembered them fondly. She watched from the window as they got into a sedan parked for surveillance. They made a call, wrote notes, then drove out the same road the SUVs had taken. Appeared at Sierra's shoulder. Strange, didn't even drink their coffee. "Probably nervous about the storm," Sierra replied. But her mind was already turning. The SUVs had been reconnaissance. These men were follow-up. The next wave wouldn't be scouts. They'd be hunters. And hunters meant only one thing. Her cover had been burned. Her life in Timber Creek, the only place she dared call home, was seconds from collapse. She served pie. She wiped down tables. She smiled at customers who didn't see the war simmering behind her eyes. But inside, Mirage was already moving. Because Sierra Blake was just a waitress, but Mirage was something else entirely. And Mirage had just been called back from the dead. What happens when the life you've built for 8 years collapses in a single heartbeat? Sierra Blake knew the answer the moment she saw the SUVs crest the hill the next morning. This time they didn't roll past. They turned, right into Timber Creek's small downtown, tires crunching gravel, engines too steady for civilians, doors opening in controlled sequence. Operators, not tourists, not law enforcement, military. Her hand tightened around the coffee pot as Frank followed her gaze through the diner window. "Tourists don't travel in convoys," he muttered. His voice was low, but Sierra caught the tension beneath it. "And those plates, those are government." She smiled like she hadn't heard him, but inside, her pulse was steady thunder. This wasn't reconnaissance anymore. This was approach. The bell above the diner door chimed, and the room's atmosphere shifted as if a storm front had blown straight through the walls. The first man through was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed like a civilian, but carrying himself like a wolf among sheep. His eyes swept the room, threats, exits, weapons. Not one glance wasted. 2 more followed, just as precise. And then the 4th walked in. Sierra froze. Lieutenant Commander. The years had carved lines into his face, cut his hair shorter, given his voice a deeper weight. But it was him. She would have recognized him in a crowd of thousands. His presence filled the room the way it always had, quiet command wrapped in calm authority. "Morning," said, addressing the diner like it belonged to him now. "Beautiful place you've got here." Conversations died. Fork stopped midair, stepped out from the kitchen, confusion on her face. Frank's hand went to his holster, the instinct of a man who knew danger when it walked through his door. "Can I help you with something?" the sheriff asked. His eyes locked onto Sierra, and in that instant, years collapsed. Recognition hit him. He masked it well, no twitch, no gasp, but Sierra saw the dilation of his pupils, the micro-pause in his breath. He had found what he came for. Bustled forward, trying to smooth the tension with small-town hospitality. "Sierra, get these seated. Bring them some coffee." The name hung in the air. Repeated it softly, as if testing its weight. That's a distinctive name. Her steps were measured, her movements precise as she approached their table with the coffee pot. Up close, she could see it in his eyes, shock, yes, but something more. Relief, desperation. A need he hadn't come here to disguise. "What can I get you?" she asked. Held her gaze. "We're not here for breakfast. We're here because we need to talk to someone about a matter of national security." The words fell like a detonation. Frank pushed up from his booth, hand resting on his weapon openly now. The loggers shifted uncomfortably, watching strangers invade their morning routine. His face went pale, eyes darting between Sierra and the men in her diner. "National security," Frank demanded. His tone carried the sharp edge of authority. "This is my jurisdiction. You'll show me credentials or walk right back out that door." Moved slowly, deliberately, drawing a leather folder from his jacket. "Lieutenant Commander, Naval Special Warfare Command. We're here on urgent military business." Frank studied the credentials with the scrutiny of a man who'd seen his share of fakes. "This doesn't give you jurisdiction over my county. You'll tell me exactly why you're here." His voice softened, but it didn't lose command. "We're not here to arrest anyone. We're not here to cause trouble. We need to speak to someone who may have vital information for ongoing operations." Every eye in the diner turned to Sierra. Her cover, the careful identity built on bureaucratic fiction and small-town routine, cracked beneath the weight of their stares. And knew it. Because his next words weren't a request, they were a charge. "We're looking for someone who used to be known by the call sign Mirage." The silence was absolute. Sierra heard the tick of the wall clock, the low hum of the neon sign, her own heartbeat echoing in her chest. Frank's voice cut through the stillness. "That's enough. Sierra's been here for 8 years. She's no operative. She's a waitress." 8 years, repeated. His tone was pointed. "That's exactly how long ago certain classified operations concluded. Certain personnel disappeared." Running was no longer an option. They had found her. The only question now was what they wanted, and what they knew. "It's okay, Frank," Sierra said quietly. Her voice carried an authority that stopped him mid-protest. The hesitation in her posture vanished. Her movements sharpened. Her eyes hardened into the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had lived through fire. "They're not wrong." His face drained of color. "Sierra, what are they talking about?" Sierra looked at the woman who had given her work, protection, normalcy. The woman who had unknowingly sheltered a ghost. "My name isn't Sierra Blake," she said. "That identity was created after I left military service." "Left," interjected. His voice was quieter now, tinged with something like regret. Or were extracted after operation, black tide went sideways. The name struck like a blade. Memories she had buried beneath years of silence surged back. Mogadishu. The embassy extraction that became a massacre. 17 operators went in. Only 3 came out. The rest listed as KIA, buried under layers of classification. She had been declared dead. And for 8 years, she had lived that way. That operation is classified, Sierra said, falling back into military precision despite herself. Was classified, corrected. His tone carried a grim finality. Recent events changed everything. Admiral has been selling intelligence, names, locations, identities of black tide survivors. You're compromised. The weight of his words landed like ice in her veins. How many? She asked. 3 confirmed dead in the last 6 months. Accidents on paper, but they were targeted. And Sierra's voice faltered for the first time. Your name is on that list. Outside, thunder rolled over the mountains. The storm had arrived. And for the first time in 8 years, Sierra Martinez, Mirage, felt the past clawing its way back into her life. The bell above the diner door chimed again. And the nightmare truly began. How do you tell the people who sheltered you for 8 years that the storm outside their door is here because of you? Sierra didn't have time to explain. The bell above the diner door swung open again, and with it came the sound of boots striking tile in perfect sequence. 8 figures, civilian clothes, yes, but military in every line of their posture. Their eyes swept the room, weapons hidden but hands always free, forming a perimeter without drawing a weapon. Controlled, precise, overwhelming. And behind them, the thrum of rotor blades. Helicopters, multiple, getting closer. Frank's hand clamped down on his holster, froze behind the counter. The loggers who filled the booths went silent, instinct telling them they were no longer part of small-town routine, but something heavier, darker. Stepped forward, raising a hand slightly as if to calm the tension. No one's here to hurt civilians. We're here for one person. His eyes locked on Sierra. Chief Petty Officer Martinez, call sign Mirage. The name landed like a thunderclap. Lips parted. Chief what? Sierra inhaled slowly, her every instinct screaming to act, to move, to fight, but there were too many civilians here. Too much risk. I was Navy, she said finally, voice low, steady. SEAL, classified operations. I was declared KIA in Somalia 8 years ago. Frank's jaw clenched. You've been living under my jurisdiction for 8 years, as a ghost. I didn't ask for that life, she said, the words heavy. I was given it to disappear, to stay safe, to protect others. The storm outside deepened. Rotor blades thundered closer, the windows trembling under their vibration. Teams shifted, their calm masks cracking under the urgency pressing against them. One of his men leaned in, whispering urgently in his ear. His expression darkened instantly. We've got movement, he said. Hostile teams converging from multiple vectors. They know we're here. Sierra's blood went cold. Nodded grimly. Our extraction was supposed to be covert. Someone sold us out. The loggers began to rise, unsettled by the tone, but Sierra raised a hand sharply. Sit down. Quiet. Don't move unless I tell you to. It wasn't the waitress speaking now. It was Mirage. Frank stared at her, caught between disbelief and recognition. Because the way she spoke, calm, commanding, absolute, was the voice of someone who had lived and breathed authority in life-or-death moments. Where's your best defensible position? Asked her, urgency cutting away any hesitation. Cascade Ridge Fire Tower, Sierra answered without pause. Single-access road, clear lines of fire, hardened comms. We can make a stand there. Can you get us there without main roads? A sharp, humorless smile touched her lips. Blindfolded. The first explosion rattled the windows, controlled charges, perimeter fire meant to corral movement. The civilians flinched, gasped, clutching the counter. They're here for me, Sierra said, turning to the woman who had given her a second life. And anyone who gets in their way won't survive. His eyes were wet. All these years, who are you? Sierra's chest tightened. Someone who owes you everything. His hand landed on her shoulder, pulling her attention back. We've got 4 minutes until they breach. Then we move now. She set the coffee pot down with the same precision she used to chamber around. Every muscle in her body shifting, aligning, transforming. The waitress dissolved. The operator returned. Mirage, said, his voice steady, almost reverent. It's good to see you again. But Sierra didn't answer. Because Mirage was already gone, her mind calculating escape routes, supply caches, enemy positions. Through the diner window, she saw dark figures rappelling from the helicopters, black shapes descending against storm clouds, a perimeter tightening like a noose. She moved. Out the back through the woods to her cabin, and his team followed with professional silence. Behind them, Timber Creek shifted from quiet town to battlefield in less than 60 seconds. Her cabin stood waiting, ordinary in appearance, extraordinary in truth. She didn't bother with keys. One precise kick, and the door yielded to a hidden mechanism. Inside, she moved straight to the fireplace, pressing a concealed switch. Stone groaned, hinges turned, and the hearth rotated to reveal stairs descending into the reinforced basement. As men paused at the threshold, their professional masks cracking at the sight. Jesus Christ, one whispered. Weapons, ammunition, survival gear, communications arrays, 8 years of paranoia turned into a subterranean fortress. And on the wall, the vest, Mirage's vest. She lifted it down, strapping it across her body with movements smooth as muscle memory. The name stitched inside caught the dim light. Mirage. This isn't souvenirs, she said, loading magazines with crisp precision. This is the difference between us living through tonight and being erased. Studied her. We came here because of what you can do, because of who you are. Her jaw tightened as she checked her rifle. Then you came to the right place. Outside, the rotor thunder deepened, closing in on Timber Creek like war drums. Inside, Sierra Martinez Mirage made her decision. She wasn't running anymore. The storm had come to her doorstep, and she was going to meet it head-on. What do you do when the hunters closing in know the same tricks you do? Sierra Martinez Mirage didn't hesitate. The concealed exit beneath her cabin opened into a depression camouflaged as nothing more than pine needles and forest floor. She had built it for this moment, spent years preparing for the day she prayed would never come. Now it was here. Move, she ordered, voice low but sharp. His team followed her without question, their movements crisp, professional, efficient. They were operators, but here, in these mountains, she was the one with advantage. Behind them, the thunder of helicopters shook the treetops. Strike teams swarmed Timber Creek with ruthless precision. She could hear doors kicked in, engines forming perimeter blocks, the distant panic of civilians realizing their quiet mountain town had just become a war zone. They moved fast, weaving through brush and fallen logs. Sierra's boots touched the earth with the silence of muscle memory. For 8 years, she had walked these forests, training in solitude, carving paths invisible to untrained eyes. Every ridge, every deer trail, every creek crossing had been mapped in her mind. Vehicles surrounding the town, Torres whispered, one hand pressed to his earpiece. At least 30 personnel, 4 helicopters, Mobile Command Center. His eyes cut toward Sierra. They brought an army. Good, Sierra muttered, scanning the terrain. Means they're scared. Minutes stretched like wire. The team moved deeper into the forest until Sierra's instincts fired sharp and sudden. She froze, raising a fist. Everyone dropped low. Patrol, she whispered. 50 yards ahead, 2 figures moved along an old logging road. Tactical gear, suppressed rifles, eyes sweeping the tree line with professional discipline. Former military, contractors now, expensive, dangerous, but not locals. They're good, Sierra whispered, watching their movements through her scope. But they're predictable, standard patterns. Can we bypass? Asked. We could, Sierra answered, eyes still locked on the patrol. Then her voice hardened. But they're too close to civilians if they start sweeping houses. She didn't need to finish. Frank, every logger and waitress who had unknowingly sheltered her, they were all targets now. Chief, said tone measured, we can't hit every patrol, not and make the ridge. Sierra's expression turned to steel. We don't need to hit every patrol, just the right ones. Before could object, she was moving. Mirage lived up to her name. One moment she was crouched beside them. The next, she was gone, absorbed into the undergrowth like shadow on water. The two-man patrol never knew she was there. She came from their blind side, silent as breath. A strike to the throat, a sweep of the leg, one man unconscious before he hit the ground. The second managed a startled inhale before her knife kissed his carotid, then darkness claimed him too. 30 seconds, over. Wen and his team caught up. Both men were zip-tied, hidden beneath thick brush, alive but out of the fight. Williams, the youngest operator, exhaled sharply. Jesus, I've never seen anyone move like that. His eyes never left Sierra. Now you know why they called her Mirage. She stripped the patrol for intel, fast hands finding radios, tactical maps, frequencies. Every detail confirmed her assessment. His people were systematic, conventional, effective but rigid. They're tightening the net, she said, assuming I'll try to run. Adjusted his rifle. You're not. Sierra's smile was sharp, humorless. I spent 8 years running. Today I turn around. The radio in her hand crackled, a clipped voice cutting through the static. Team Alpha, report status. Patrol Bravo, check in. Timber Creek perimeter secure. She listened, memorizing call signs, noting how their command net flowed. Then a phrase chilled her blood. Diner secure. Civilian detainees in custody for enhanced interrogation. Frank, the loggers. Her jaw clenched, eyes narrowing into cold fury. They've got them, she said, voice tight. Who? Reeves asked. The people who gave me a home, Sierra replied. The people who made me human again. Frank, the others, their leverage now. Torres frowned. Chief, we don't have the manpower for a civilian rescue and extraction. Sierra's eyes burned like steel. Then we changed the rules. She keyed the captured radio, switching to command frequency. Her voice carried like a blade through the static. Admiral, this is Chief Petty Officer Sierra Martinez. Call sign Mirage. You have 30 seconds to release those civilians and withdraw your forces. The reply came swift, smug, dripping with condescension. Mirage, alive after all. I was hoping the stories were true, but you're not in a position to make demands. We have 17 civilians. Their survival depends on your cooperation. Sierra's hand tightened on the rifle. Admiral, she said coldly, you've made 2 mistakes. You assumed I'd trade operational necessity for civilian safety, and you brought conventional tactics against an unconventional enemy. Then tell me, sneered through the comms, what makes you think you can challenge a full tactical deployment with 1 ghost and a handful of strays? Sierra's laugh was razor-thin. Because you're not hunting Sierra Blake, the waitress, anymore, you're facing Mirage, and Mirage doesn't negotiate with traitors. Static filled the silence. And then the forest erupted. Suppressors cracked, muzzle flashes flared in shadow. Sierra dropped flat, rolling behind a fallen log as rounds shredded bark above her. His team responded instantly, returning fire with disciplined bursts. But Sierra wasn't where the enemy expected. She was already moving, sliding through the undergrowth, weaving through blind spots. A shadow reborn. 3 targets down in 20 seconds. Another neutralized with a knife before he could adjust his scope. Her voice cut through the comms, calm, precise. Left flank clear, push forward. The fight was chaos, branches snapping, gunfire echoing through the cascades, but in the middle of it, Sierra moved like water, like smoke, like mirage. When it was done, 5 hostiles lay neutralized. His team hadn't lost a man. Williams stared at her, awe on his face. That was impossible. Sierra wiped blood from her blade, her voice flat. No, that was necessary. But inside, her chest ached with a truth she couldn't shake. Every bullet fired here drew Timber Creek deeper into war. Every civilian held hostage reminded her why she could never go back to being Sierra Blake. And every word from reminded her why Mirage couldn't stay hidden any longer. They had Frank. And Sierra Martinez had just decided to bring war back to their doorstep. What do you do when the enemy has taken the people who made you human? Sierra Martinez Mirage had spent her life learning to survive impossible odds, but survival wasn't enough anymore. Frank and the others weren't numbers on a mission report. They were faces, names, people who had fed her, protected her, asked nothing from her except honesty, a thing she could never fully give. Now they were hostages. And Sierra knew what hostages meant in hands. We need to regroup and hit their comms hub, Torres said, crouched behind a cedar tree, scanning the. Cut their coordination, buy us time. Sierra shook her head, eyes still locked on the direction of the town. No, they'll start interrogations as soon as we cut their comms. It's not patient. He'll break them fast. We don't have time. Gaze met hers. He already knew what she was thinking. You're not suggesting. I am, Sierra interrupted. Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a soldier who had already decided. I walk in, alone, let them take me. Reeves swore under his breath. That's suicide. It's leverage, Sierra countered. They want me alive. I'm the ghost they've been chasing for 8 years. They won't kill me, not until has wrung every drop of intel he thinks I have. That buys us time. Enough for you to reposition, infiltrate, and get those civilians out. His jaw tightened. And you. Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second, the iron mask slipping just enough to reveal the ache beneath. You know me. You know I'm better on the inside than out. I'll dismantle them piece by piece from within. Torres looked between them, disbelief etched across his face. Commander, we can't just. But raised a hand, silencing him. His eyes never left Sierra's. He studied her, like he was searching for something buried deep. The woman who had once fought at his side, the woman he thought he'd buried years ago. Finally, he nodded, slowly, painfully. Then we do this your way, he said. No more words were needed. They moved fast. Men began splitting gear, handing Sierra what she'd need without drawing suspicion. Micro-transmitters hidden inside buttons, a thin blade disguised as a hairpin. She stripped her vest, her rifle, her obvious weapons. By the time she was done, she looked almost like Sierra Blake again, just a woman, unarmed, vulnerable. But her eyes told a different story. When she stepped back toward Timber Creek, hands raised, she was Mirage in disguise. The perimeter guards spotted her within minutes. Rifles trained on her chest, commands barked sharp and clipped. On your knees, hands behind your head. She obeyed without flinching, every motion calculated. They bound her wrists, forced her forward, shoved her toward the diner that had become a staging ground for operation. Inside, she saw them, Frank, the loggers bound to chairs, guarded by armed contractors. Fear in their eyes, confusion, betrayal. His voice broke when she saw her. Sierra, what are you doing? Sierra forced calm into her tone. It's okay, I'm here. A heavy silence filled the room before the last voice she expected to hear spoke. Well, Admiral said, stepping from the shadows. His uniform was gone, replaced by tailored civilian clothes, but power clung to him like a second skin. His smile was thin, cruel. The ghost herself, Mirage. The contractors shifted, their grips tightening on weapons, as if her presence alone demanded more force. You've been a busy little phantom, continued, circling her like a predator tasting the air. 8 years, hiding in plain sight, serving coffee to loggers, no less. I have to admit, I expected more from one of the most decorated SEALs of her generation. Sierra's eyes never left his, and I expected more from an admiral than selling out his own. The smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Then it returned, sharper. Idealism, always your weakness. He nodded to his men, and they dragged her into a chair opposite him, securing her wrists, ankles, every movement locked down. "You'll tell me what you know," said calmly. "Every survivor, every asset still in play, every back door the Navy left open when they buried Operation Black Tide. And when you're done," he leaned in close, his voice dropping to a whisper, "maybe I'll even let your little diner friends live." Sierra let the silence stretch, let his arrogance fill the room, and then, with a voice so steady it felt like stone, she said, "You made 2 mistakes, Admiral." His brow arched, amused. "Oh." "One," she continued, "you assumed you're the only one playing this game. And the second." She leaned forward, eyes burning into his. "You forgot who I am." The room shifted. Something in her tone unsettled even the most hardened contractors. Because Mirage wasn't pleading, she wasn't afraid. She was calculating. And every man in that room had just become part of her plan. Outside, deep in the forest, and his team moved like shadows, closing on Timber Creek from 3 angles, guided by the faint pulse of Sierra's hidden transmitter. Inside, Sierra waited, watching with the patience of someone who knew the game wasn't his to win. Because she had stepped willingly into the trap. And Mirage never entered a trap she hadn't already figured out how to break. How do you win when you're chained to a chair, surrounded by men with guns, and staring into the face of the man who sold out your brothers? Sierra Martinez, Mirage, didn't move, didn't flinch. Stillness was power, and she'd learned long ago that fear fed predators. Prowled the diner floor like he owned it, his polished shoes whispering against the worn tile. He was careful not to touch her, careful not to give her the satisfaction of proximity. His arrogance was armor, but armor always had cracks. "You're quieter than I expected," he said finally. "The reports painted you as volatile, reckless, the woman who orders, who questioned command, who bled insubordination." Sierra's eyes narrowed. "Funny, that's not what my men called it. They called it surviving." His jaw flexed, just enough for her to see she'd struck something raw. "You see," he continued, packing slowly, "the Navy built warriors like you to fight its wars. And then what? They bury you, abandon you, pretend you never existed, whereas I see value, I see opportunity, and you, Mirage, are a priceless opportunity." She let his words settle, let his men hear them, because soldiers, even mercenaries, heard everything, and arrogance could be a blade if you turned it right. "You think they'll follow you forever?" Sierra asked, her voice calm, cutting. "You think they'll die for your greed?" Her gaze shifted to the contractors stationed by the door, their fingers tapping against rifle stocks, restless. "You've sold out brothers before, Admiral. What makes you think you won't sell out the men in this room?" One of them shifted uncomfortably, just a flicker, but Sierra caught it, filed it away. Laughed softly, though the edge in it betrayed him. Classic deflection, sowing doubt, but these men are loyal. They're paid well, better than the military ever would. "Until someone offers you more," Sierra replied. The silence that followed was sharper than a blade. Leaned closer, his voice dropping. "You're not going to win, Sierra. You're alone, forgotten, a relic. And when I'm done, your name will vanish again, not as Mirage, just gone." Sierra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "If I'm forgotten, Admiral, then why are you so afraid?" The question landed heavier than a gunshot. His face darkened, and he turned sharply, barking orders at his men. "Secure the civilians, double perimeter. If and his boys are here, I want them found." So knew, but didn't know what Sierra had already set in motion. The hairpin tucked in her braid pressed lightly against her scalp, sharp enough to cut ropes when the time came. The micro-transmitter sewn into her shirt button pulsed steadily, sending her location into the Cascades. And most importantly, her words, each one chosen like ammunition, had already planted seeds of doubt. She watched the contractors shift, watched the small fractures ripple through their posture. Men paid to fight had limits. Fear, uncertainty, the suspicion that their leader valued gold more than blood. Those cracks would widen. All she needed was time. And team was buying it for her. In the forest, crouched behind a fallen trunk, rain dripping down his face. His men were spread wide, moving in careful arcs. They were close now. Too close. Signal's holding steady, Torres whispered. She's in the diner, still transmitting. His jaw clenched. He hated this. Every instinct screamed at him to storm in, to cut her loose, to fight shoulder to shoulder like they once had. But Sierra had been right. She was better inside. She's playing him, said, more to himself than anyone. I've seen her do it before. Doesn't even realize he's already bleeding. Question is, Reeves muttered, adjusting his rifle, can she hold long enough for us to make the breach? Didn't answer, because holding was what Mirage had always done best, but holding came at a cost. Inside the diner, the storm swelled. Turned his attention to Frank, bound and defiant despite the blood on his temple. Sheriff, he drawled, you've spent your life protecting this backwater. Tell me, do you really think she belongs to you? Do you think she's one of you? No, she's mine. She always was. Frank spat blood at his feet. She doesn't belong to anyone. Smile vanished. His hand snapped out, striking Frank across the face with vicious precision. Sierra's jaw tightened, every muscle screaming to break free, to tear the ropes apart, to end where he stood. But she stayed still. Not yet. Because sometimes, restraint was the deadliest weapon of all. You'll regret that, whispered. No, Sierra said quietly. You will. The contractors shifted again. Small, imperceptible, but Mirage felt it, saw it, knew it. The cracks were spreading. And outside, his team was in position. The storm was about to break. What happens when the storm you've spent years preparing for finally breaks? The walls of the diner shook with thunder, not from the sky, but from the forest. Controlled detonations. Small, sharp, deliberate. The kind that announced the beginning of an assault. Stiffened, he knew the sound. His contractors tightened grips on rifles, eyes flicking nervously toward the windows. Sierra lowered her head, hiding the smile tugging at her lips. They're here, she whispered. Snapped his fingers, barking orders. Lock down the perimeter. Kill the sheriff if you have to, but keep the waitress alive. The irony wasn't lost on her. She had been hiding behind that word for 8 years, waitress. Now it was the only thing keeping her breathing in calculus. But not for long. The hairpin in her braid slid into her fingers with practiced ease. Each tug against the restraints was silent, precise. Years of muscle memory guiding her hands. One guard shifted too close, nervous, scanning the door. He didn't even register her slow inhale before the rope around her wrists gave way. Her hand shot up, driving the sharpened pin into the soft tissue just under his jaw. He crumpled soundlessly, and Sierra caught his rifle before it clattered against the floor. The sound of gunfire exploded outside. Short bursts, suppressed fire, men striking with surgical precision. Chaos ripped through the diner. Contractors scrambled to positions, yelling commands that overlapped, none of them cohesive. The first window shattered inward, smoke grenades hissing across the floor. In that confusion, Mirage was reborn. She surged to her feet, cutting the ties on and Frank with a knife stripped from the fallen guard. Stay down, stay quiet, she whispered, her voice both calm and commanding. His eyes were wide with shock, but her trembling hands obeyed. Snarled, dragging his pistol free, aiming straight for Frank. Sierra didn't hesitate. She moved between them, rifle snapping to her shoulder. One shot, precise, clean. The weapon flew from his grip, his hand tearing open in blood. He howled, stumbling back, rage eclipsing his composure. You think this ends here? You think you can erase me? Not erase, Sierra said coldly, chambering another round. Expose. The door blew inward, his men flooding the diner like shadows, weapons raised, movements coordinated. Williams dropped 2 contractors before they could find cover. Torres cleared the left flank. Reeves secured the civilians with calm efficiency. And moved straight to Sierra. For one beat, one impossible, breathless second, their eyes locked in the chaos. Years of silence collapsing under the weight of a war reignited. Then the moment was gone. They fought shoulder to shoulder again, as if 8 years had never passed. Covering angles, sweeping corners, fluid in rhythm. Mirage and two halves of the same precision machine. Contractors broke under the pressure. Some fought desperately, others hesitated, their loyalty already corroded by Sierra's words earlier. One even dropped his rifle, slipping through the chaos and vanishing into the night rather than dying for greed. The battle was sharp, brutal, efficient, but not without cost. Reeves caught a round across the shoulder, dropping with a curse. Williams dragged him to cover, returning fire through gritted teeth. Shielded Frank, dragging him to the safety of the counter as bullets shredded the walls above them. And through it all moved like a serpent, slipping, surviving, sliding toward the back exit, blood dripping from his wounded hand, rage twisting his face. Sierra saw him, but wasn't just retreating. He was pulling something small from his jacket, a device, not a weapon, a detonator. Her blood turned to ice. She shouted, sprinting after. He spun at the threshold, grinning despite the blood on his face. "You don't win today, Mirage. If I fall, Timber Creek falls with me." His thumb pressed down. Nothing. He blinked, confusion flashing across his face. Looked down, pressed again. Still nothing. Sierra raised her rifle. "You really think I'd leave my town wired without countermeasures?" His eyes widened. The faintest tremor of fear flickered in them. "Your problem, Admiral," she said softly, "is that you always underestimated the Waitress." She fired. The round tore into his thigh, dropping him instantly. He collapsed in the doorway, screaming in fury and pain as men closed in, rifles trained on his chest. It was over. The gunfire fell silent, leaving only the hiss of smoke and the ragged breaths of survivors. Civilians sobbed, clutching each other. Men swept the last of the building, confirming all threats neutralized. Sierra stood in the middle of it all, chest heaving, the rifle still warm in her hands. And for the first time in 8 years, she felt the weight of who she was settle back onto her shoulders. Not Sierra Blake, the Waitress, not the ghost hiding in plain sight. Mirage. The soldier they couldn't kill. The storm had broken, but it wasn't finished. Because was still alive, bleeding, spitting promises of vengeance, even as his men abandoned him. And Sierra knew one thing with absolute certainty. The war wasn't ending in Timber Creek. It was only beginning. What do you do when the man who destroyed everything lies broken at your feet, but still won't stop? Bled across the diner's floor, his expensive jacket soaked, his hand trembling where Sierra's bullet had torn through his thigh. He wasn't defeated, not in his mind. He laughed through the pain, the sound jagged, unhinged. "You think this changes anything?" he spat, eyes blazing with arrogance that hadn't dimmed with blood loss. "I built networks, whole armies of shadows. Cut off one head, 2 grow back. You'll spend the rest of your life running again, Mirage, always hunted, always watching over your shoulder." Sierra leveled her rifle, her breath steady. Around her, team tightened their perimeter, weapons trained, waiting for the word. But she didn't pull the trigger. "Running isn't who I am anymore," she said quietly. "I stopped being your ghost the second I walked back into this fight." Slav faltered. His arrogance wavered, just for a moment. Stepped forward, voice calm but edged with steel. "Admiral, you're under arrest for treason, conspiracy, and the murder of U.S." "Arrest?" sneered, blood dripping down his chin. "You think you can parade me into a courtroom? You don't understand the machine you serve. They'll bury me in metals before they bury me in chains." Sierra's voice cut through his defiance like a blade. "Maybe, but history won't. You'll be remembered for what you really are. A man who sold his brothers, a man who thought loyalty could be bought." The contractors who had survived lowered their eyes. Some dropped weapons entirely, refusing to look at him. Sierra's words had landed. The cracks she'd sown had broken wide open. Was alone. The sheriff, bloodied but standing, limped forward. "I'll take it from here," Frank said grimly. "He'll sit in my jail until federal custody arrives, and if he tries to pull rank again, he'll find out small towns don't bend easy." Sierra looked at Frank. A silent exchange passed between them. The sheriff who had trusted her without knowing who she was, and the soldier who had deceived him to survive. "I'll answer for the lies," she said softly. Frank shook his head. "You already have." Gave the order, was bound, dragged from the diner with none of the grandeur he had once carried. His curses echoed into the night, promises of power that no one believed anymore. And just like that, Timber Creek exhaled. The next morning, the mountains were quiet again. Smoke rose from broken windows, bullet casings glinted in the dirt, but life stirred. Brewed coffee on a portable burner, her hands shaking as she poured cups for the loggers who had survived the longest night of their lives. Frank leaned against his cruiser, bruised but steady. His eyes followed Sierra, who stood apart, staring at the tree line like she was already halfway gone. Approached her, silent for a moment before speaking. "They'll come for you, you know that." She nodded. "'S right about one thing, the machine won't let this go. They'll want Mirage back under lock and key." "You don't have to run this time," said. His voice was softer now, the commander stripped away, the man beneath showing. "You could come back, wear the uniform again, lead." Her eyes flicked to, who was serving coffee with trembling hands but a steady heart. To Frank, who had defended her even when the truth cut him raw. To the loggers, men who'd seen her as nothing more than a woman pouring coffee at dawn. And for the first time in years, she smiled. She said quietly, "I've already led, I've already fought. What they need now is Mirage. They just need Sierra." He studied her, understanding in his eyes. A soldier couldn't fight forever. Some wars ended not with victory, but with choice. "What will you do?" he asked. She took a long breath, letting the mountain air fill her lungs. "I'll stay, I'll rebuild, and if they come for me again, they'll find me ready." His hand brushed hers, a silent farewell, an unspoken promise. Then he turned, gathering his team, vanishing into the forest as quietly as they had come. Sierra watched them go, the silence heavy, final. Then was there, her hand warm against Sierra's arm. "You don't have to explain everything," whispered. "You don't owe us that. You're one of us. That's all that matters." The words hit harder than any bullet. For 8 years, Sierra Martinez had been a ghost, a myth, a name carved in classified files. Now, for the first time, she was simply a woman, alive, seen, home. That night, when the last of the smoke had cleared and the town lay quiet beneath the stars, Sierra sat alone on the diner's steps. Her rifle leaned against the wall beside her, silent. She stared out at Timber Creek, at the mountains that had sheltered her, at the people who had unknowingly saved her. And she thought of all the battles fought, all the names buried, all the voices silenced. Not with pride, not with regret, but with something quieter, something truer. Sometimes, dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And in that silence, Sierra finally found peace.